Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ida Purley, the Deputy Director here at the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. And today we have Marcy Allsbach with us and Eric Davis from Grown In to talk to us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Ida. Sincerely appreciate it. We've enjoyed all of our partnership with MICAA, so big shout out to you all, and obviously thank you again for hosting us today. I'm with a colleague, Marcy, who will introduce herself in a moment, and we are not joined by Kathy Pyle from Nobo, who, as a kind of sign of the times today, couldn't make it at the last minute, and we obviously wish her all the best, and all the Nobo crew who we love working with. But they told us to speak all the things that they would say, which is mostly lots of praise and mostly uh, an attempt to help you understand why they're doing certain practices to increase efficiency, increase institutional knowledge, capture really the essence of their culture. So all sorts of cool stuff around that. Marcy, welcome.
Well, hello. Thank you. And thank you, Ida, for having us here today. I am Marcy Elsbach. I'm the Senior Account Executive with Grown In.
And Marcy, have you ever been to Michigan before?
Oh, listen, I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I hold Michigan fondly in my heart, and I have been able to spend time with many great people in the industry of recent, and it's been a pleasure of mine.
I'm a lucky one too. I can happily say that I reside in Michigan, and made that move, several years ago now. Very grateful for it every day. But let's get to it. Okay, so the purpose of this is really to talk about the opportunity to increase efficiency for very little investment in your team financially to be able to get a lot of ROI return. And I kind of want to just frame this a little bit, but we are specifically speaking to MICIA members because we value this association and the opportunity to, as a group, try to work through a very challenging time in the industry, but not just get through, but really thrive. So the practices that we're talking about today are not only for sustainability, they're actually for thriving, whether you are in a mode of contraction or you're in a mode of sustainability or you're in a mode of growth. So those are some things to keep in mind. Marcy, I know there's an MICIA special. Do you want to tease that now or just we get to it later?
Oh, well, we'll just keep teasing, but how about I let people know a little bit about what Grown In does? Just a
Do
nice
you
little,
want do you want me to
right?
show any background while you're giving the background on Grown In?
You can show what you would
Sweet.
like.
I'll give you a little background.
Yeah. So, many of your viewers may use Grown In as a go-to, very trusted resource for industry expertise. And we take that plus our subject matter experts and our learning designers to understand really what your current and in this industry ever evolving needs are as cannabis operators. We do this by providing online courses in onboarding, training, and multiple continuing professional growth courses. And we also do this in a way that we look at and pay attention to your HR processes. We want to streamline that for you, and we call that your company playbook, where you can house your SOPs and your company handbook and really highlight who you are, what your culture is, and what your brands are. So that's a quick Grown In recap. What you're looking at here is based on my time in Michigan over the summer. I had many conversations with the Michigan operators, and these were conversations about what challenges are you facing to provide employee training. And I listened to that. And I also pulled from what I know as somebody who has been in the field for 5 years, training employees, opening up new stores, walking through several inspections, and just really pulling from what I know, what does work and what doesn't work, and how can we get that to Michigan. And here's the screenshot that is of the most interest then. So what we've done is created this MICIA special for Michigan operators out there. And what we've done is we've considered what you said your needs are, and we've presented it based on what your company looks like. You'll see that it prices and such are based on company size. And also, we are paying particular attention to your economical needs. So I have this link in the chat. So please click on that and go over it and look at what we are offering to all the operators in Michigan. We're really excited about it.
Sweet. Thanks, Marcy. So we did run a little bit of a commercial for ourselves. Now let's talk about why that's a value to you and make that 2-minute commercial worth 30 minutes of your time. And again, that's the whole goal, is maximizing some kind of ROI. So hopefully the opportunity cost of that commercial is worth the next 25 minutes. We want to frame this conversation within the immediate context of the industry. So right now, tomorrow, today, the CRA is preparing for a meeting that they're hosting tomorrow. And that's a critically important public conversation. As you know, there's a lot of transition at the CRA. There's transition in the industry. I don't know. I'm not going to cast any judgments or, try to suggest anything that you don't already know. I think there's a couple of really obvious factors that are going to influence everything we're going to talk about, which is about hiring, controlling your costs, optimizing your team, increasing customer loyalty. So for me, I'm looking at this and I'm like, too many licenses. There's some questions about the license types and capacity, too much supply, and that means that everybody who is operating is pinched to be able to work with much smaller margins and in a higher stress environment and in a super competitive environment. So how do we capture and maintain the essence of why we got into this industry and are doing what we want to do in this industry and building an effective growing industry while also balancing those very, very real and critical pressures right now, because they're impacting all operators. So that's a little bit of context. Marcy, do you want to talk a little bit about the upside of that? Like, what are some ways to save money on time and compliance and employee retention, increase customer sales?
Certainly. When I think of compliance, I think of your doors are open, right? Customers can come in. And as an operator, you want to keep those doors open. The CRA lets us know what the laws are, the regulations are, and the requirements are in order to keep your business operating. If you think of compliance and learning everything that is within our Illinois responsible vendor training, that encompasses everything that the CRA is saying is law and regulation.
Our Michigan responsible vendor training. It's true.
Michigan.
We do it in many states, but this one is specifically tailored to the CRA.
That's right. Yeah. And so really, I think of safety. And this is what I used to tell my team members when I was introducing responsible vendor training with them. It's a matter of keeping the licensee safe. Their doors are open. They're not closed. They're not being hit with fines. They're not running around all over the place trying to find the appropriate documents, right? And then also for the learner, this will keep their agent badge safe. So ultimately, it's a win-win for both the employer and the employee. And, responsible vendor training, like it's in the name, responsible. To me, I see it as something that should be considered a variable in your formulaic business strategy. It's a necessity, and it gives your employees all of the information that they need to stay safe.
So let's pick up on that specific thread for a second. So one thing that's a lot of Michigan operators do is that they train in-house. And so the concept of a responsible vendor training is something like we do our training. And specifically because the CRA has not enforced that specific element of the law, they've kind of in-house is fine. Now they're getting more tighter on documentation, whether it's SOPs or what kind of training they're doing exactly. But from where I come from, I think that I've seen really companies kind of say, like, we either want to invest in this concept of excellence and our culture of learning and our culture of sustainability and institutional knowledge, or we need to cut costs. And my argument is always like, you can do both, because A, obviously there's inexpensive training, and B, there's deferred structure. But most importantly, there's the culture of ongoing learning and the benefits and how quickly those things pay off. So Obviously, everybody wants to keep their doors open. As you said, they don't want fines. But I think also like they don't want to waste their time. And there's a ton of time lost from HR and compliance simply because they don't have an open badge system where 24/7, 365, everybody can see every employee's progress, every employee's certificates, where they are in their courses, when their certs renew, that they have a 30-day notice of those things, and that's available to multiple layers of management. So you're not waiting on one person, you're not dependent upon one person. And at the same time, that's going to constantly evolve. So those are things that are those equate to actual dollar amounts in every one of those cases. In this sort of situation, Marcy, I can't help but think of that cliche, like, necessity is the mother of invention. And I just feel like contraction and growth, whatever, like this moment requires greater efficiency in production with fewer resources. So whether you're running a cultivation site and you have literally fewer staff to work with and your shift is just as long and you're growing more plants, or you're in a dispensary and you haven't been able to hold on, you've had too much transition on your employee staff and you only have a core who are able to be there and you're asking them to do more hours, like that's when mistakes get made. So all of this comes back to how to stay afloat, how to continue to grow and stay ahead of the curve. So let's transition, and we're Kathy here. We would be like, hey, Kathy, introduce yourself. Tell us all about you and Nobo and why you're at Nobo. And Kathy's not here, but Nobo is a pretty wonderful company. They have a few different sites around the state. Marcy, do you want to talk a little about them? And then I can describe my visit to them and kind of where this all came from. Maybe give just a little bit on Nobo, and then I'll talk about why we're working with them and where we are.
Sure. Nobo is a vertically integrated company in Michigan, and they have multiple dispensaries. The team is wonderful, and they look towards the future of their company from day one, which is why they have decided to work with us. And Eric has actually spent a lot of time at their wonderful facility in Benton Harbor and can speak to that.
Yeah, so thanks. So one of the things that's so cool about Novo, they're another multi-state operator where they have activities in other states, and they're looking at how do we differentiate ourselves from the market, both in Michigan and in Colorado and some other states, and what is unique about the way we do what we do. So as a vertically integrated operation, you all understand this. You have a special sauce in your cultivations. You have, even though processing is the same, you're not the same. You're going to, again, move through a lot of the same stages in your processing. You're going to do it your own way. And then your dispensary is going to feel, look, and invite people in their own unique way. So all this stuff is, on the one hand, special sauce and unique. On the other hand, there's a lot of the same stages in each group's process. So then it comes down to things like culture and technology and turnkey systems and an ability to rapidly and effectively upskill people. And Nobo, in addition to, so they have a deep commitment to the technology behind their grow and behind the way that they do their work. And I don't feel like it's an over dependency, which in a lot of cases you see. So forget about the editorial. They are using a lot of technology in their work, which means that you're actually talking about a whole bunch of skill sets that they require on their team. That's the big takeaway. It's not enough to get your hands dirty in a plant, right? In this case, you really have to understand now that, again, all of the training systems are there, but that's something that has to be done there. On the other hand, their culture, you might think okay, well, if they're kind of an automated company on some things, that maybe they're culturally vapid. On the contrary, I walk into the grow rooms and they are rocking out. Each grow room has different music, and the vibe of the people there are people who love working with plants, and they deeply appreciate working with each other. I asked a basic question to these two gentlemen who had moved up the ladder and were, leading the grows that I was looking at. And I was like, so do you consider yourselves master growers? And they both said, no, every plant is unique. Got to learn every plant. We're still constantly improving our system. And there was a humility in the way that they responded and that they talked, and a reverence almost for the process, that I thought, okay, this place is significant, but it's still craft. they're still practicing the artisan lifestyle just at scale. And so then that brings back like, well, why were we there? So one of the things I want to show you is the way that we integrate SOPs with moving beyond what I would call like the really, really boring and brutal 200-page SOP doc. So let's see what this looks like in real time. Marcy, do you see a Doc X retail dispensary?
I do. I see retail dispensary SOP.
Okay.
Yep.
Sweet. Okay, so this, I'm not going to show you a ton of this, but I want to use some things to juxtapose. So this is obviously a table of contents for a long SOP manual. I am also not going to give away anything proprietary. You can see where this is going to go, right? There's a bunch of SOPs. Now you're going to see every SOP. Well, then you marry that with, do you see Google Drive with a ton of images now?
Yes.
Okay. So now you marry that with going through step by step, room by room, stage by stage, person by person. And my learner experience is the learner experience that an employee goes through. And the reason that we do that is because then we want to be able to carry that all the way through so that when an employee trains and they join the team, then they're training in the NOBO system. And when they're learning all of this stuff about responsible vendors or the guidelines or the requirements or whatever it is, or how they move through their cultivation environment, that it's all tied to their brand and within their culture. So excellence is something that is available on their cell phone when they're doing something right there and they need to know how. Or even more likely, and you can see they have all their courses, even more likely at some point, an SOP is going to change. And when they go into, let's say, one of the trimming rooms, they're not going to have a scissors and a bucket of alcohol. They're going to have a different tool, and they're going to have a different bucket, and it's going to be a different place. And all they need to do is snap a picture right then, and everybody on the team can, obviously can get vetted and integrated properly. But like within 24 hours, the whole system can improve, and that's a smart operational system based on real human capital. You're not counting on a computer to do anything. It's not figuring out the algorithm of your grow. We just want to extend your experience to the maximum capacity. So, these are the kinds of things when you look at like Flourish, obviously they did this too. They did a blend of customizing their stuff versus having truly custom courses. So like in their client advising course, they did something where they have a whole course come up. But Nobo is doing, I think, one of the more robust integrations, because in order to kick off their training to the team, they literally asked me to, or invited me in to move through the process as if I were, a material good going through the supply chain. And that's the whole point. That's where we catch the nuances. So I just talked for a while as if I were explaining from Kathy a little bit of why we were there. And I blurred some of the takeaways, or I blurred some of the experience. So Marcy, what are you thinking about as I was going through that stuff?
They've really taken the opportunity we've given them and just run with it. It's great that we were invited in to really be able to credibly speak to their company's handbook, their company's SOPs. And we know how they want them to be portrayed and what they think is important. We take that information back and we make it as clear and concise and streamlined as possible for then the learners. So it's great what they're doing, and with our capabilities, I can't wait to do it for everybody.
I think there's something else that's really important in terms of a turnkey solution, which I would kind of recommend to all HR and compliance folks. Okay, and just to give myself a tiny bit of credibility, I've helped build 4 organizations, or I've helped build 6. I founded 4. They've all turned over to the next generation of leadership. So in each of those cases, we had a system that was really dependable. And that system we needed to use for onboarding employees. We needed to use it for upskilling employees, and we needed to use it for transitioning. And we actually needed to use it for our system. So with Nobo, one of the things that's really cool is like you have your basic compliance trainings you need, whether it's HIPAA down here, you can see there's a HIPAA for cannabis companies, or a harassment prevention. You're all going to do this too, some version of the compliance training. It doesn't matter to me if we do it with us. I prefer you do it with us, but it matters to me that you do it, and that you do it in a way that you have really turnkey information. And then when you're doing more what I would call professional growth training, things like cannabis care, which helps you understand more of the nuances between medical and recreational use and which kinds of symptoms, you might use particular methods of delivery for, et cetera. Just diving a little bit deeper than your more entry-level training might offer. And then you really have to think about how each division of the company functions and does that in a turnkey sort of way. And the reason we use the idea of plug and play is that we're not here to tell anybody what to do. And I hope that any learning partner or consultant you're going to work with would tell you the same thing. We can help you do it really efficiently. And the whole goal is keeping it simple, keeping it accessible, and keeping it in a way that it can refine basically in real time when there's a gap between what the SOP says and what the reality is on the ground. That's actually the key moment so that we don't have a mistake, we don't have conflict, and we don't have outdated policies, which just foster a different type of problem. And then the other thing that I think is really important about this is, again, the transparency of training. And for employers, I want to look at the flip side for managers and employers. When you think about like this array of certifications which are available, and again, it's not whether we're providing them or different companies providing, this is about employee mobility and enterprise flexibility. So employee mobility means we want to give our employees the opportunity to grow and change and advance in their careers and in their lives. Employer or operational flexibility is about being able to operate without being absolutely nails against the wall because you didn't have flexibility in your decision making. So for example, if you have a bunch of people in your dispensaries who are interested and demonstrate through their own initiative the capacity to uptrain in cultivation and trimming, it means that you don't necessarily have to go outside to hire more people for 3 weeks during the trimming season, right? And vice versa for several other activities. Well, you would only know that if you have that sort of insight in a dashboard. So you want to. I don't just want to showcase our stuff, but like, it's really important to know who's expiring in what credentials and who's available in what areas specifically so that you can be flexible. And again, that's about saving money and time, because if you know that information, then you're going to save all of that HR process time that you would go out trying to bring in new people. You run a much lower risk of working with people who you already have training with in terms of improving their performance than you do in getting people off the street for like a new batch for something like trimming. So Marcy, are there any other on the ground stories that, as I'm kind of reeling off high level business value to this, that you're thinking about, like these are mistakes that could be made with XYZ?
Yeah, I like that we're touching upon what we can offer them in terms of streamlining technical processes and HR processes. I'd like to talk about the educational and the training that we offer as well, because I started in this industry as a bud tender, and the beginning of my journey, I felt uncertain. I did not know what new skills I needed to learn, processes I needed to learn, what knowledge I needed to have, and what the feeling was going to be like surrounded by so many different new people. And there's actually a saying about uncertainty, and it's the feelings of uncertainty are precursors to growth. And that is exactly what you as an employer are given at this point. You're given a ripe opportunity to bridge that feeling of uncertainty into confidence. And if you do that in a streamlined, company-focused, educational way, then you will certainly catch your employees' attention. They want to learn. And whether they're new, this is not only for people who are onboarding, this is also for those employees who have given you their time and their loyalty, and they deserve to grow within their roles. And that kind of goes back to what Eric was saying, having all these different processes available to everyone. They can learn cross-functionality. It makes them feel as though their employer invested in them and that they're valued, which is ultimately going to lead to better customer service, customer loyalty. It's going to build your business, and it's going to give you an edge, a market edge over your competitors.
Yeah. Sorry, can I pick right up on that specific thread? Yeah. So that's one of the things that actually really stands out to me. So for example, let's say that in your facility, you notice that you have a decent percentage of people over the age of 55, right? And whether or not you had already purchased this course for your team members, or it came through like the MICA special where they were able to get access to the content in the library. Like if you found out that 50% of your bud tenders were taking this course, and if you wanted them to do it and you saw a correlating spike in performance because they literally better understand the niche market, that's the kind of thing that is it's a low-hanging fruit training that is going to result in increased ROI, sales, loyalty, retention from that niche client base. So like that's the kind of thing where somebody can learn and get better. It's not a compliance course, it's an elective. It's something of their own interest, which impacts your bottom line. Same thing with women's health and cannabis. Like a lot of this comes down to really knowing who your client base is, and or having a better sense of who you want your client base to be. And so if you look at the marketing and you tie back to the kinds of marketing, like women-owned cannabis businesses, I would assume, and don't want to just assume, but in this case, I'm going to assume relatively safely that they are going to care about serving women in there as an audience. And I would equally assume that everybody wants to understand how to sell more effectively. And across the board, that requires better understanding of who the client is and where they're coming from and what their experience with cannabis is and what kind of pre-existing biases may exist and all of that. So there's all sorts of different ways, I think, from a learning perspective that you can very inexpensively, if it's targeted and if you're paying attention from the management side to like, okay, either you're choosing to do this proactively, which is what we're suggesting, or you make it available and you pay attention to the behaviors that the employees are demonstrating themselves, and then you're responding by promoting and or increasing the rewards that are available and or increasing opportunities for those people.
Exactly. And what the viewers are seeing right here is a catalog of our courses that we've developed by listening to each of our clients and knowing the industry at large. And really, if you look at the titles, it runs the gamut. So there's empathetic sales and client retention. And that's going to teach your employee how to speak to people in order to get the correct information so that you can provide them the best service. We've got.
I just realized, Marcia, we should probably position empathy sales right next to de-escalation.
Let's go right to de-escalation.
Right.
That was given directly by one of our clients, a wonderful manager at a wonderful company. And many people may be surprised to hear that within dispensary facilities or others, there are moments where you are going to need to de-escalate a situation. So we've decided to address how do you do that before it occurs, during, and then after. And this is really geared towards everybody, but managers can certainly use this, and people, security, anybody who has here you go, you're seeing that anybody who has more of a reason to be in a situation where you may need to use these tools.
Yeah, and again, I want to stress, this is not about mandatory compliance training. I don't believe that de-escalation is required by the state, but how many times do you lose business or employees or just a day of stress or have to have too many meetings and write-ups because the team just isn't trained in stuff like this? Right. So again, minimal investment, big takeaways.
Right. And one of the things that I want to make clear here is retaining your employees, therefore less churn. You're going to be more profitable if that is what your model looks like, right? And this is how you're going to do that. And I'm only saying that because I've lived it. I've been that learner, and I've used Grown In as an tool to implement within another company. And
you were a client first.
Yes, I've used this. So yes.
Not only the Hair Club president, also a client.
You know it. And it transforms how employees view their job from day one, week one, and then they sit down and they start doing this really streamlined, organized training that's just full of great information, and they feel valued and they get excited, and that means they're going to stick around longer because they think you're going to give them more of this.
I want to pick up on that actually, and maybe talk about, obviously there's gamification and swag elements, which are super cool because people, as they learn about brands, they get rewards from the brands. But that again, that's just an incentive, but incentives matter. I want to pivot for a second and talk about some of the data side again on the dashboard. This is the kind of thing I was saying you want to know. You always want to know what your certifications are. You always want to know what your courses are, whether, again, you're using our system or somebody else's. This is key information you want to know for every user. You really want to start checking on this sort of a relationship. How many learners versus how many courses? So, for example, if you were to buy Michigan Responsible Vendor Training and Cannabis Care, you could assume that you'd have, roughly just under 2,000 learners, in here. But or 2,000 course enrollments from active users. But this indicates that no, there's almost like 6 courses for every learner. That means that these people are really choosing more than what the company is paying for. So this is another way to think about that. If the company is paying, call it $50 per learner, per employee, but the employees are getting $250 in course value, they're already demonstrating a 5x return even before that's translated into sales. That's just in terms of their own desire to learn information that's available. And then the other huge management piece, which is just like a stress relief, is you really want to know who's expiring in the next 30 days. So these things are kind of, I would say, in your own information set when you're kind of managing and looking for how you can create efficiencies. Those are going to be the most important pieces of information that I would recommend.
I agree. And I just would like to say, and this is speaking to employers who consider setting up a program like this. I know a lot of times people go into it thinking, I don't want to set another requirement on my employee. I don't want to give them yet another thing to do. But I always felt that when you set expectations, you should know that most employees are really excited about what they're going to get out of that. And that's the new skills, the new knowledge. They're going to have new tools to pull from, and that's going to keep their attitude more positive. So, utilizing something different than what you are may actually be a great thing. It's going to keep your employees happy, and then that's going to make the customer come on back.
So are there any questions from the audience at this time? I think you can feel free to write them into the chat. I know we have a couple of write-ins from text, but okay, this is a good question. How is Grown-In different? They recognize that we were talking about our own stuff. Sorry. How is Grown-In different from other companies providing this training? Do you want to tackle that? You want me to?
You go ahead, and then I'll piggyback off you, Eric.
Okay. Well, I think one good example is Marcy. Marcy, you should actually share a little bit more about your background. Let's actually start there. So credibility. So yeah, who are you?
So you bet. So I am I'm a registered nurse, and I spent many years at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. Ultimately was the staff educator for internal medicine nurses there. And then fast forward many years, and I was a registered medical cannabis patient, and I found myself in the dispensary setting, and I would hear patients ask really serious questions about their health, and then I would look to the bud tender to see how they were going to respond. And that's when I realized I had a new calling, per se. And I just felt empathy for both parties. Some didn't even know what questions to ask, let alone how they were going to be answered appropriately. So then I started with a large MSO here in Illinois, multiple roles, and was with them for about 5 years. As we touched upon a little bit earlier, I actually utilized Grown-In Learning to onboard all of the new employees, but also the employees that were currently there. And it was a joy, a pleasure, and it helped out so many times in so many ways. So I'm happy to be here with you now, for sure.
That's really cool. When you talk about your professional experience as a nurse, like that always stands out to me from not just from like a credibility standpoint, but as you said, like I think people want to believe the hype one way or the other, and you got to cut through it and get the real information. So one of the things I really appreciate about the kind of content that we create is that it's been requested by our clients. The empathy sales course was because a couple of dispensaries came to us and said that their team didn't know how to ask questions and how to encourage the sales process. And then the de-escalation came because other ones were finding that they were losing sales and they were having conflict on their team. And the churn was crushing their books. So those sorts of things make a lot of sense. But I also feel like one thing that's totally different is like the experience that I had at Noble. Like, we'll go anywhere. We love going to clients. Like, that's the highlight of my week is going to be doing a tour at your facility, because I'm wide-eyed and I'm like a young kid looking at this amazing operation and just trying to figure out how I can how I can make this better. Like, how do we take what you're already doing and make it better? So, how do we help you be you to the best of your ability? So I think that that's a huge difference. Our content is different. It's all inquiry based. So we always have guiding questions. We have calls to action, which are not the same as assessments. So a call to action would be an example. So let's say you're learning about, I'm like, wow, completely drawing a blank for a second. Let's say that a call to action is to do the checkout, the moment of checkout, when you're asking for an ID and you're confirming the item that they wanted and the item that you have. And that's when we're like, point of sale is not, you cannot afford to make a mistake at point of sale. But if we just say, here's the point of sale guidelines and that's it, and we're not asking you to think about that moment where either you or a colleague messed up at the point of sale and where that thing went wrong, or how you could do something better, how you could be more clear to the staff, whatever it is, take a moment of reflection and application. And other ones, we ask people to do some, consider surveying their friends for some questions about how they use cannabis in their own lives. So, there's a bunch of different things in the call to action. We have an array of video images on every page. We do try to use mnemonic images so you really remember what we're talking about. Integrations of the brand process with an actual streamlined, like a required or a state requirement or something like that. So, 24/7, 365 badges, 365 support. We do what a lot of people do, but I think we're a little bit more human.
Yeah. And I would say also, we address the different levels of learning capabilities, the different people that work within these stores. Yeah. Not everybody is me and wants to, write something about cannabis genomics, right? But there are plenty of people who want to level up their knowledge because they get questions from the public coming in and they want to be able to speak to those and seem to have credible answers. And to what you were just saying, Eric, that really is competence. And I remember the early days, somebody said, this is an understanding company. And what that means is we don't want the learner to just simply regurgitate information. We want them to be able to understand it, yes, but then connect the dots. And so how we do that is within each of our courses, we let them know what the utility for them is. How is this going to work for you where you're working? Why do you need to know this where you're working? And so it really should culminate into a foundational conceptual understanding of the company and what they're expected to do working within the company. And that's a good feeling when you know what you're supposed to know.
Yeah, that's for sure. I wish we all felt that a little bit more. Right? Right. Even, hey, look, we practice what we preach, but it's still hard. Okay, cool. Well, I think anybody who's been watching this has probably heard us at this point kind of beat some drums. I want to close with the opening in a way, just kind of like reiterate the key point, which is it does not cost much to do this sort of thing. In fact, it's extremely inexpensive. We'll show the MICA special on the way out, and I'll show you just how cheap it is. Yeah, thanks, Marcy. Making $1,000 on $50 investment, like the ROI is there for the case. More importantly, investing in your sustainability and your ability to thrive, especially when things get tough, like that is worth doing every day. So that's my 2 cents. Whether you want to work with us or you want to just learn from us and take that information and try to do something in-house, or you want to look at others and use us as a benchmark, please reach out to us. Marcy, who do they reach out to?
me. So reach out to Marcy, Marcy, at Grown Shoot me an email and I will be very, very happy to talk to you.
You want to put that in the chat box
I'm
too?
throwing it in the chat for you.
And just, I guess my 2 cents will actually be on cents. Oftentimes people don't want to put their rates out. Like these are the most discounted rates that we've ever offered. And it's specifically to MICA members. We're doing this because like we get it. The last thing you want to spend on right now is training. We are here to argue for professional education as a way of improving your business and increasing your bottom line. And we want to do it as cheap as possible. So these numbers, like all 25 employees for under 1,000, 25 to 100, those are at the actual rates. There's nothing hidden in here. And that's for a bunch of different content. Obviously, you can reach out to Marcy at grownin.com if you want to learn more specifics. But bottom line is we're really trying to make this available to you. And yeah, obviously we're here to learn with you. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen and hopefully write in with additional things you want from us. Marcy, thanks as always for being here and catching up with me. Kathy, thank you. I know you can't hear me right now, but you'll hear me later. And thanks for the pre-work and the conversation. It's always a pleasure to see you before this one. We'll catch you on the next one. Everybody, be well. Take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.